Okay, so I was wondering if there are any questions to make a start from the audience. Yes, yes, please.
Yes, Mark, I have a question for Marco.
Just a minute to give you the microphone, please. Just a minute.
Good afternoon, Graham Ellis from Ellis Transport Services. I'm the city champion for Southampton in the City Lab project. Having run both freight and passenger operations, Marco, have you looked at the problems of mixing people and goods? Because to maintain a decent service for the public to use the Vaporetto or whichever ones you're using, the dwell time at stops is highly critical to maintaining an even service. If you start unloading and reloading goods onto boats, it causes problems. I wonder what your solution was to that problem.
Should I answer? No, now. Yeah, we are perfectly aware that cargo hitching has, obviously, from an operational point of view, quite a huge number of problems to be solved, actually. But it's also true that there are some pilot actions all around Europe, and the number is growing in that respect. We are at the initial step in Venice. Venice has a beautiful logistics system, really, dating back from the medieval, maybe. I'm joking, obviously. And we are at the first step. The first step is to demonstrate the feasibility of this new system, particularly for the peripheral urban area. That's the major point. To serve the lagoon, the islands, which suffers a lot from lack of accessibility, livability, depopulation. That's a major point also from a political point of view. So the first step is this, that try to assess the feasibility. The next steps will be going much more details into operational level, which is not the case. No, I'm joking again. This is not. The next steps is to change the rules. The next steps is not to go into the operational aspects, absolutely not, unless you change the rules. That means the overall regulatory frameworks, we won't be able to do anything. Because, for instance, obviously, as you know, the freight transport systems are under, basically, at the regulated market, or so to speak, let's say. While the public transport is obviously heavily regulated from the municipality, from the metropolitan area, and so on. So the first step is first to embed this new integration, the new concept in the forthcoming SUMPs. We are quite happy, we are quite lucky in this respect because the new SUMPs will be launched, I guess, this summer in Venice. The last was in 2008, okay? And then the second step will be to open a tender in which the public body says, okay, you can integrate the two systems, and please move ahead with the interesting offers from operators, how to integrate them and so on. So the next steps, I know very well that I'm done. This is a very important point because also here in Brussels, they say, okay, that's beautiful in Venice, new systems. Okay, go ahead, show us some pilot case. No, unless you change the rules, nothing will happen. And you are absolutely working very closely with the stakeholders. We are very concretely, we have a number of meetings with them just to embed this new concept in the new SUMPs we will be working on, and just to open the tender. Which is not an easy task, but we are there.
Any more questions? Yeah, Tom, please.
Yeah, Tom Sherratt from the University of Southampton. Question for Richard, just about the micro hubs and the last mile. Just very interested if you could just say a bit more about how that element would work, particularly thinking about, you mentioned the Sainsbury's example, but obviously you don't really want each retailer with their own fleet of last mile people. Have you had any dialogue with the Uber Eats and Deliveries of this world to see how a homogeneous group of lifestyle couriers might perform that and what the benefits might be?
Yes, thanks, Tom. It's a good question, actually. One of the observations over the 3 years of our project is that at the beginning it was clear that retailers were not considering any outsourcing of the last mile element of their e-commerce logistics operations, nor would they necessarily consider collaborating overtly or less so with other retailers to enable a more efficient last mile operation to take place. Now, whilst that is probably still the standpoint of most of the retailers, the reality is that the costs of the operation have forced them to focus on looking at new solutions. One of those is around click and collect, but I think the upcoming one now is really around alternative last mile transport, be that bikes, be that electric vehicles, and the options for micro hubs. So I think the opportunities in those markets are quite considerable. One of the things that are going to hold it back is related to regulation. So, for example, within the planning system, there needs to be more provision made in urban developments for the options to use micro hubs. And related to transport, there needs to be, I think, a look again at the regulation related to parking restrictions on different types of vehicles, and also the costs of some of the legislation related to the types of vehicle licenses that can be held by different types of drivers and related to different types of vehicles themselves. So, Tom, I hope that answers the question. If not, perhaps we could pick up afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's my turn, if that's okay, to ask a question for all the presenters here. So I try to be a bit, let's say, cunning here, and I'll probably ask, if, let's say, you're starting this project again now, let's say we're starting next month, and based on what you know already and the knowledge you have already, what you'll do differently to create more knowledge around urban logistics?
Well, interesting question. Well, our project has some different from the other projects that have been presented here, because we addressed this very, very specific domain that is the construction domain. This is a guess that we have made when we think to prepare the proposal for this goal. So if I look at this tutorial, I see that we have discovered a world that was in which there was no study at all, or just very, very, very few studies. So we have started collecting the literature. The literature was more or less empty. We have visited London. That was the only place in Europe that we have found that in which there still exists something that is working. But there are just two of these centers for two companies that are working in all London. So it is a really preliminary study. So not my concern is not what I will do in a different way, but what I would like to do in the futures, because I think that in this domain there is a lot of things to do. We have provided different tools, the tool that I've showed you now. We have other tools that are for a raw estimation of the interest of using a CCC, and there are other tools for the cost-benefit analysis. All of these tools, at least not in the complete version, but in a usable version, will be available in our website. So I invite you to visit the website, to contact us to use this tool. So what I would like to do is not to change what I have done, but to continue to study in this direction, and maybe to think to other domains that are not studied now, that we don't know, because we speak of a lot of different domains, grocery and other kind of goods, but probably there are some specific domains that we have not studied. It will be interesting to know.
Well, about CityLab is including 7 implementations, 7 projects, 7 cities in Europe. What I guess we would have done differently, had we known what has been going on for the past 3 years, is that in these 7 projects, we have industry partners. In all of these 7 projects, we have freight operators, we have retailers or shippers. I suggest what we could have done better is asking these industry partners to commit more into providing their data. We would have found ways of anonymizing the data or finding ways not to disclose anything based on their private business. But I think commitment from the industry in terms of urban freight projects, urban freight knowledge, commitment from the industry, from the freight operators is extremely important in the future. So now we really have to work better together with the academics, the policymakers, and the industry to make sure that we have that data. We did miss some data from our industry partners in some of the projects.
Thank you. So it's a good question, and of course I haven't had a chance to ask all the other organisations involved. So I'll offer a personal point of view, I think, on our particular project. I think that some very, very interesting research has been done, and the results are quite are very insightful. I think in hindsight, what I would like to have seen is a project that had a slightly wider scope to it, and particularly with more emphasis on the understanding of how to exploit the results from a business perspective. I think that would have been useful in 2 ways. It would have forced us to consider what the exploitation opportunities might particularly be in terms of business language much earlier in the project as we go through the research element of it. And then secondly, it would enable us to actually put more resource, more of the project resource around the exploitation activity. So a personal perspective.
Thank you. Yeah, from our side, the question is nothing. I would have had some regrets, maybe saying that I should have started this case studies some years ago, but that wasn't true, because this is the right time. Because as I said, the new SUMP is moving forward this summer, and actually we had a very great opportunity working on the field to discover very important cooperation, very important engagement by the various stakeholders. This project would be was a sort of engine to promote such a cooperation with the municipality, with the metropolitan area, and the logistics operators. Obviously, things are not easy, because it's not very easy to pull together all the pictures, saying the various urban components, because obviously on top of public transport, freight transport, we have lots of other components in Venice as in any other cities, ranging from taxis, from other kind of boats, and so on. So, nothing particular.
Okay, again, this is also my personal opinion, because I think we're all involved in these projects, most of us who participate here, so each one have their own opinions. So I guess if I'd start this project again, I would saying that I had the same knowledge as when I started this project, so probably I wouldn't change anything, because you can only change if you have knowledge. I think what we have to take from these projects is the knowledge not of the data, but the knowledge of how the others work, because these projects bring us all into around the same table, let's say. I represent the domain of researchers, but there are a lot of cities that have been involved in the projects. From each one's sides, we do our own work, but it's a very good opportunity to be able to communicate and obtain knowledge on how the others think, how they work, and how we can bring our knowledge together so that we can improve situation. I think the most important thing would be for all the projects, for all these projects anyways, that reach to a very good level of collaboration among various stakeholders, is to establish some kind of continuation, because there is a lot of work being done, and it would be a pity for stopping it here. So I guess for researchers, we have to keep on trying implementing our, let's say, academic knowledge to more practical levels, and for cities to continue exploiting the results of these opportunities of these pilots, to expand the measures that they have tested, and actually provide some better mobility and transportation in their cities.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure we have more time for questions because it's time to go for lunch. Having said that, almost all of you are still here. That means that this session is very successful, because being tempted to go down for lunch is, I can fully appreciate that. But try to provide the concluding remarks of this session. What is coming very, very strongly to me is the element of engagement with stakeholders. It's becoming more and more critical, especially with companies and councils and other, let's say, important members of the supply chain. But not only to get to have access to data, but I think most of my colleagues here and other presenters did mention about creating a relationship, working together, make it happen. But of course, Richard did say as well, representing the industry, and I fully appreciate that, working very closely with industry and practitioners, not only make it happen, but make a difference, making an impact. So I think that's quite important too. More importantly, I'll probably say it's time to conclude the session. Once again, thanks very much for staying a bit longer, and lunch is waiting for us after this session. Thank you very much again.